We have up to this point with part one and part two explored not just philosophy, but also physiology, biochemistry, biology, as we've come to understand the structure and the systems of the brain through evolution, to give us the gift of what we carry on our shoulders. And in the course of doing that, I've tried to better understand everything from attention to memory to perception to the capacity of the brain to demonstrate a whole variety of dimensions, from remembering places, which octopus seem to be able to be able to communicate with one another. But now we enter in part three with a completely different phase in the evolution of mind, and that is the evolution of the social and civic mind, shaped to some extent by the brain itself talking to itself, or ourselves getting to know ourselves through meditation or whatever, hypnosis, uh, medicinal intervention, but also through civic exercises like education, law and order, and parenting. So with that as sort of a background, I'm just going to open it up and ask, to the extent, and this will be my initial question, to what extent do we ever really even think about what has shaped our behavior today? There are some people that say, well, that's how I was born. I've heard that as a defense in criminal trials. Or I had an indigenous upbringing, therefore I'm excused from any responsibility of the self. I can blame it on nurture or blame it on my DNA. Uh, to what extent do you take responsibility for your own behavior and understand its origins? Now that's deep, really deep. To what extent do you take responsibility for your own behavior and appreciate its origins? Tommy, you have to. I mean, you've been a student of this, and I know that full well. Whether or not we were drinking wine together, sitting in front of a fire in the mountains, and wondering about where all this behavior comes from. Do you want to wax eloquent at all about the extent to which our behavior is a product of experience versus just birthing?
Give a boy a hammer, and he'll find all kinds of things to hammer. There's nice, what would I call it? A strain of thought that says much of our civilization really began with our ability to begin to use tools, and that enabled us to think about something more than just our immediate self and using other things. And you might say that was the start of course, what enabled us to survive against much stronger and tougher odds. And yeah, that's one aspect which you might not have thought about. How how the things that we make also shape how we think and what we are and how and what we
Well,
do. So there's a
well, well,
there's,
I mean, if you think about the wheel, the wheel gave us an opportunity to experience much more than we could experience when all we could experience was through walking or running. Uh, Technology opened up the capacity of our minds to experience some things far beyond what simply our imagination generated. So technology has been an extraordinary partner in the course of this journey, but that wasn't really where I was focused. But you've introduced that as well. I was introducing initially that we become human together, and by that meaning, yes, we're human biologically, but to be a social human means to be something, a byproduct of our social experience, and how a parent or a friend or an enemy or a policeman begins to shape the experiences and the memories that we carry, that then begin to govern everything from risk to opportunity, to how we translate and how we perceive the world around us. So we become social beings, not just individuals. Go ahead, Tom.
yeah, but all those things will be aren't what you aren't unique to being humans. The animals are the same thing. Uh,
No, yeah, but I'm not saying that the
Created
unique.
by birds and what they learn from their parents and interactions with other members of their herd and so forth. So, what's different about these interactions that you're describing now from what other animals do?
Well, they don't get on a wheel. They don't have policemen. They don't have governments. They have symbols. They have experiences, and I think that's your primary point. Is yeah, all living organisms and many other organisms get shaped by the environment that they live in. But by focusing on what Jim Evans would focus on is the social impacts versus the environmental impacts is really the focus of much today. But yeah, an octopus, well, a puppy, a dog is very social. Dogs are incredibly social, but they're not born social. They become social as a product of exposure. If they're not exposed to people, dogs can be quite wild, but they get, quote, socialized through social experience that shapes, and I say shape, cultivates their behavior, provides limits, provides boundaries, shows them where to find things by using sticks, as monkeys learn how to use sticks, as seagulls learn how to drop clams, etc. Jeff, you've got your finger over your mouth. That means you're thinking. What do you want to add, Jeff, here?
That's a very broad topic. I think we're all of our experiences contribute to our actions. Home life, school, work, everything. We get socialized from an early age, and of course, children who don't have those advantages, the ones who are historically the ones who were raised by wolves or other animals never are able to actually fit into society. I've heard that there's a group in like an indigenous group in Brazil. Their concept of numbers is one, two, and many. Anything that's more than two is many. And they can't be taught, the concept of 10 or something like this because their brains after a certain age just cannot accept Western mathematical
Mm-hmm.
principles. There's a certain amount of there are windows that we can learn certain things in. Like I think approximately half of our neurons die within the first year of life in our brains. And basically the rule is if you don't use it, you lose it. And then the rest of our life, the pathways that we use the most are the ones that get strengthened and preserved, and the rest of them slowly die off, which is kind of interesting too.
Well, I mean, that point that you make about Windows is quite prophetic. It's not just the Windows based on, well, it's the Windows based to some extent on moments when our brains can receive when they couldn't receive. We see it, and my wife did work on the development of the concept of time. Time is not continuous before around grade three. It's pars pro toto. It's situational. It's bedtime. It's supper time. It's time based, but time is always associated with an event.
Mm.
But after grade three, the brain has developed sufficiently that they can begin to learn of the continuity of time. And she could demonstrate that at a certain age, children would watch a movie and they could only tell you about events, but they couldn't say this follows that, follows that, follows that. Continuity wasn't there. But then biologically, the brain was sufficiently developed that it could begin to entertain concepts like time. Now, I wonder whether or not the brain is ready to receive such things as empathy.
Well, animals have empathy. That's pretty clear.
But
Um,
do they have it at birth? Is this a byproduct of a social, like empathy implies a recognition of something happening to someone else that might be happening to you. There's a relationship there. So you're not necessarily born with empathy, it evolves. Now, maybe psychopaths just don't have that part of the brain, but that is in itself interesting. Is something as significant as empathy in civilization is a byproduct of our socialization. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I have 2 points. The first one was related to what Jeff was saying, and the second one just now what you were adding. So let me start with what you were just adding, Perry. I saw, well, first of all, I saw a video recently of a pride in Africa. That's and lions, and the female lion was had a daughter, a lion or lioness, and that daughter was attacked by a male lion.
Mhm.
and died in the attack. And the female lion stayed with the dying babe, so to speak, probably a 2 year old, like likely by that size, at least more than a year, and stayed until the heat was so oppressive it couldn't stay longer.
Yeah.
It was a sign of empathy.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. And you could see this animal walk around and looking at this younger animal
Hmm.
and looking with sort of what we would might say tears or passion.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I suspect
So
in,
empathy, I do agree, is there in other animals.
yeah. Yeah. Well, we've the experience of elephants. We talk about crocodile tears. I mean, there is in the animal kingdom clear evidence of empathy at certain points. I know Haley has done some research regarding elements of behavior among birds, among octopus, etc. She might want to jump in here on anything that she's picked up on comparative psychology and behavior. Anything you want to add to this discussion at this point, Haley? I know I'm putting you on the spot early, and that's not fair, but anyway, I'm not fair. That's me.
It is early. You are fair. I'm glad to jump in. Um, and and interesting, it's a pickup of last week. And the reason you and I had this conversation about the octopi and the corvid species is because I got the impression last week that we were talking about a particularly mammalian function. And I think, Tommy, you were talking about, and Perry was talking about evolution, uh, and this concept of consciousness being particular to mammals. And that's where Perry and I took it offline later. And I said, well, what about the octopus that doesn't have the neocortex basis? And it's a completely not connected, and apparently not connected for 60 million years. There's no evolutionary connection between the octopus neurological sensory things, and octopi can dream, so it does have an elevated capacity. This has been proven. This isn't just a hey, I watched my octopus teacher, and I saw the octopus displaying some characteristics. This is well studied. And the corvid, same thing. So no mammalian neurocortex similarities at all yet. By using the same rubric that we're evaluating consciousness in mammals, they display the same thing. So we're talking about such things as empathy, and anthropologically that's been studied with primates for a long time. That's not even something that we need to challenge. The thing, the only thing I could come up with that was potentially different, and I see this in your conversations here too, and it's what we're doing now. It's this search for meaning. What does it actually mean to have this? And there was one, I think it was Brian Cox, who was talking about this beautiful line Carl Sagan had. It's like the physicist is analyzing the hydrogen atom from the point of view of a hydrogen atom. And that's kind of beautiful. And this is what we're doing here. And it's interesting because there's no definitive answer, but I just love to hear y'all's explanations.
I want to touch on that point of the neocortex, because we did at the end of the last session talk about how uh, consciousness is not just one thing. It's the capacity to do many things, some of which exist in elements of the animal kingdom. But it's only humans that have the capacity to pull together so many different elements, so the many different, and that appears to be what the neocortex has allowed, is to pull together many different dimensions of consciousness. But I'm going to leave that behind, but I thought it was a point of clarity for today. The fascinating thing that I think we ultimately get into is just exactly what you pointed to, Haley, which will be central for today, is the capacity of the brain beginning to ask questions. What if? What if I was over there? What if I was able to do this? What if I could fly? What if we could build a wheel? What if we could try this? the capacity to ask questions seems to be unique. I'm going to wait to have someone
Especially
read.
if you're 2 years old.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is a point where you begin to ask that question. The child says, "Why is the sky blue?" The teenager asks, "Where did I come from?" The answers are not found in the DNA. They're often found through socialization and schooling and parenting and friends that begin to build experiences and layers of experiences. So concepts begin to emerge and imagination begins to become real. And I find, I personally, I'm sure I'm not alone. In fact, I think that's probably something common to everybody that participates in these networks, is the value of creativity, of imagination, of sharing, of learning through others. These webinars that we have are highly social, not just through the lifting of hands, but by the fact that you come back. These are social experiences. Some people have asked, well, what do you guys do? What do you ladies do? Why do you keep on coming back? There's something about our curiosity, our imagination of learning from others, from hearing about topics that one doesn't talk about necessarily at the kitchen table. Randall, you keep on coming back. You've obviously found fascination in the brain's capacity to imagine and create as a philosopher, or even as a person. Not
Well,
that they're different from one another.
this conversation is reminding me of two things that I explored as a teenager. First, I surprised myself by being able to guess a person's place in their sibling birth order. And it got like, I just met this person that we like 1 or 2 minutes, and I can know with 90% chance of probability, what place they had in the birth order and maybe what size of family they came from. I don't understand where it came from, but there it was. And I got really good at it. It was a surprising little party thing, not that I did a lot of parties. But the other thing that I'm reminded of is existentialism, talking about the human condition and being and becoming, and how people like Jean-Paul Sartre talked about the human condition being one of despair, forlorn, uh, and anguish, because we're condemned to be free. And so we try to explore this freedom, and it's scary. We find that it was in the age of atheism, so the people abandoned by God, and so things were going wide open, right? How do you find yourself? And there is, at the same time, within existentialism, the sense of duty or responsibility to act as though all people would act the same way. That is, we are each creating or contributing to the definition of humanity with each word, each action that we take. So there's a heavy burden of responsibility on us.
And that therein lies a essential conflict of what is expected as from you as a person, and that's the public, the social constraints, the social boundaries, the culture that says you shall be within this boundary and you shall reflect these behaviors and these values, versus what may well be coming out of the person that says bullshit. I'm an individual, I'm a free thinker, I can be myself. And to find ways to bring those two things together, which ultimately becomes the social individual that lives within those cultural constraints. It's a fascinating conflict that occurs every day. When there are moments when you may well want to go 61 miles an hour, but the civic says no, 60 is the limit. And yet we as individuals feel, but we have the right and we have the capacity, not just the right, we don't have the right, that gets granted. We have the capacity to go 61. Do we exercise it or do we not, has a bearing and has a reflection of who we are and how our minds have been shaped and our willingness as self to be ourself or to be someone who is not ourself. And I'm going to reflect just for a moment. on my relationship with my spouse. Uh, I was always a bit of a risk taker, an adventurer, and she came out of a society of constraint under communism. She lived in an environment where the public is never trusted, where you as an individual may have freedom, but you always have it alone. You can never be free in a public environment. And I was very different. I would hitchhike. I was much more trusting. If I got in trouble, I'll get out of it. Our policemen are not here to take things away. They're to make sure we have civic rules. Um, we lived in tension because of that. And we had to rationalize as social human beings in our relationship how to rationalize two very different social structures called our brain. Our brains were in conflict because one was shaped under an entirely different set of conditions than mine was. And so in our marriage, you could watch our marriage and see two conflicting cultures. I'm not sure that life is that complex for many because many marry people within their own culture with very similar experiences and maybe seek out similarity, not conflict, and seek out synergy. But others seek out differences. Some are more exploratory and wanting to live in an environment of difference to explore and create. And others want to live in a common space where there is less conflict with their social and cultural circumstances. So conflict becomes one of the things that we grow with. No conflict, we stay in the status quo. Some want peace and quiet. My wife wanted that. I wanted adventure and excitement. She didn't want anything to do with that. The movies that we chose, the music that we listened to, the books that we read, the way we raised our children often required attention that needed to be rationalized and talked out because we came from such different backgrounds, from a different set of social experiences. I don't know whether I'm speaking to others that have thought about that or have experienced the tension, or it's been a pretty easy ride. I think for some, life is a simple path to walk. For others, they've actually created conflict in the interest of seeing more and experiencing more. They're called existentialists. Bogdan, you jumped off a ship. The ship would have been status quo. The jumping off the ship was into uncertainty or a recognition that this certainty is intolerable. You must relate well to the point that I've been making and how the environment that you lived in helped shape your behavior.
Yeah, I think if you remember the story, as a kid, I had that nightmare with the dragon. I defeated that recurring nightmare by facing the dragon. The escape, the tanker, the jump, everything was a reinstantiation of that initial lesson, which came back as you mentioned, out of the social context and so on, in which I was brewing as an individual. Yeah. Um, my understanding is that our biology and the emergence as an embryo towards becoming a baby gives us the temperament, which is the biological foundation on which then we collect tools and ways of handling our life in a social context. We're a social animal. We're an extension of apes.
Yeah, I mean
So
that's a very good point. I mean, we are given a foundation. We're not all necessarily given the same foundation, and how we use that foundation to proceed leads us to similar or to somewhat different paths, and the extent to which social constraints bind us or keep us within a narrow or wide path. Some would say North America is more wide open, more exploratory, and people tend to be more creative, which takes me into the next question, and that is a question about creativity. Do you think, as a group, that that creativity is simply the domain of artists and musicians and dancers and those who entertain by engaging in creative pursuits? Or does creativity extend beyond? Can an engineer be creative, Yogi?
Absolutely. There's those who believe that engineers are very frustrated artists and that what they like to do the most is design. And I've observed this in the oil and gas industry where engineers take great pride in how they have designed the way they've drilled a well or their plan for completing a well, or how they arrange compressors and piping in gas plants. So I believe that engineers can be incredibly uh, creative. Some of them can. Others are incredibly narrow-minded and have big blindfolds on. But I suspect that's true for other disciplines as well, not just engineers.
Well, we've talked about the inner commons, the mind being cultivated to be more open-minded versus closed-minded, which has something to do with attention and selective attention, and the extent to which we are raised to open our minds, and that is to be attentive to a wide variety of things. Therefore, we may explore territories that others might think risky. So risk
Okay, but
becomes something that governs attention. So an engineer is told what the boundaries of attention can be and not be in order to comply with civic standards.
okay, so what you're describing, I think, is also curiosity. And
Absolutely.
I see incredible variations in individuals' curiosity. Some people are very happy in their narrow little sphere. It could even be football or basketball TV watching. And I find that incredibly uh, frustrating and annoying. This crowd here in this webinar, I hear all kinds of creativity, intellectual curiosity all the time. And it's one of the attractions of being here for me.
Well, creativity allows us to produce novel things. If it's the status quo we live in and feel comfortable with, and maybe are afraid of anything that is outside of the status quo, that may be a product of our parenting, it may be a product of our schooling, it may be a product of civil conditions. My wife experienced that in communism, which wanted you to stay within civic bounds and suppress any element of creativity that might entertain other ways of governing and other ways of behaving. So she lived in a very constrained world, thirsting because of her father, really, thirsting to explore, thirsting for creativity. And it has a bearing on her when she gets out of communism. It has a significant bearing on how she begins to behave when she is in an environment that tolerates and thirsts for imagination and the expression of creativity, which is in Pasadena, California. And it stunned her
Okay,
initially.
so the diaries of the North Korean soldiers that have been
Right.
captured in the Ukraine reflect something very similar. There's incredible devotion uh, to the leader of uh, Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, literally including fighting to the death and not becoming a prisoner. And
Right.
being a prisoner is called failure, uh, much worse than killing yourself uh, as a last resort before you're captured. It's just bizarre, but it
So when you so,
happens.
so when you think of the word compliance, you can be compliance within your conscience, which be a byproduct of your birthing and your parenting and your life up to a certain point where you have certain conditions that you wish to stay within and you try to stay within, but every now and then you may break out or circumstances may be such that you need to do something different. But for some, the adventure is to dabble over those borders. And that takes you into the realm of imagine if I behave differently. Imagine if that thing were to be done to the engineer who says, I'm going to try something different. The standards say this is the way it should work and this is the way it should be. But I'm going to try something different. Some do that and some don't. Go ahead, Tommy.
Well, I'm curious here about curiosity. Suddenly rings a real bell for me. And would people be creative if they weren't curious about something? Would they wonder if something could be done somewhere else if they weren't curious what would happen if we do things differently. I haven't seen much in literature about the question of curiosity, and I wonder where it comes from.
Well, presumably everybody has it.
Does
Presumably the brain has the capacity to explore beyond the sensory. Presumably the brain has the capacity to integrate a whole variety of inputs, put them into some combination and come up with something that's called imagination.
But that's not the same as curiosity.
Okay, take us further then. If curiosity is self-initiated, so
Well,
curiosity is something that is a byproduct of learning, or is creativity something we inherit?
curiosity would seem to be a basis for learning, actually. If you were curious, would you learn anything?
Mhm. Right. Okay. Or would you be receptive? Not just, I mean, the sensory mechanism comes in. For curiosity to work, you have to have attention, and attention that is wide open or attention that is quite narrow. So there's a phrase you guys have used from time to time about an open mind versus a closed mind.
Mm.
Attention to differences versus attention to sameness. Curiosity would seem to be taking initiative to explore differences. It's where the brain gets excited when it sees something different. It doesn't do very much when everything is the same.
Yeah.
Well, I
So,
would argue curiosity is a discover like self-discovery, a kind of trying to find something new. Think about yourself as a child, as I'm sure every one of us did this. You turn over a rock to see what's underneath it.
Yeah.
That's
okay,
curiosity.
but let's take that for a moment. Some people would turn over the rock, others would be afraid.
Oh,
Yes, that's true. Well, they'd be afraid of what they might see, little
Why?
white ants or
Where did they
eggs
get
or
that? Where
whatever.
did the fear come from?
Well, that's obviously that's coming from some previous experience.
Okay, so in Europe, going into the woods, there were many stories to keep children out of the woods because the
Yes, the
woods
grand
was
fairy tales.
dangerous. And so we had a culture that shaped curiosity and said, you can be curious all you want, but not in the woods. So
Yes.
that social interaction, whether it be culture or parent, or maybe having been bitten, having been in the woods, experience, whether it be real contact or imagined contact. So the brain can be fed things that it doesn't actually experience in reality. It can be fed things through imagination, which is incredibly powerful because now the brain is evolving, not just a byproduct of sensory input, but as a byproduct of what it has imagined on its own. It is self-disciplining. It's creating. It's creating for what limited experience it has. It is creating something that never existed before called imagination. It's an incredible phenomenon. I'm not
Well,
sure
it's like
maybe
it's
whether
like writing a novel as opposed to a technical
sure,
book. Like writing
sure.
a novel, it's all creative. You're creating characters, you're creating storylines, you're creating time frames, etc. And it's all imaginary. Well, it
Right.
might be anchored in history, but most often it's not.
Yeah,
It's out of
and
the mind.
you've used the creating of a book to illustrate the exercising of creativity. Let me
Mhm.
extend it even broader. Let me talk instead of about a book, talk about life,
Mhm.
the broadest thing you've been gifted, and whether or not you, in the course of that life, are exercising the same element in order to make that life richer and more, well, richer in the sense of a broader array of experiences and broadening your confidence and comfort and curiosity, or whether or not in the course of your life you want to stay very constrained and very status quo. You're almost talking about personality differences as a byproduct of a cultural phenomenon, as a byproduct of parenting and education. If education is to introduce for society creativity and imagination, because the beginning with the beginning of the end of the knowledge economy, it isn't knowing anymore, it's creating and imagining. You want to have a curriculum that is not constraining to comply with society as it is today. You want to create a brain that is wide open and imaginative of what creativity could be tomorrow. And I think we've now entered into the realm of the power and the relevance of the mind, the brain, the parenting, the education, the civic boundaries to create and to shape us and to preserve us and for the future. And there are those that don't want us to be exploring those edges.
You're suggesting those are the elites of some sort that don't want us to explore those edges?
No, I think it goes both ways. I think you're going to have extremes among the elites of a controlling society, but you could also have extremes at the other end that say we want to restrict your freedom of expression and your freedom of thinking. I don't think that has to be necessarily at one extreme. I think both extremes want control within the realm of what they seek. I don't think liberalism is necessarily anarchy,
Well,
although
where does a Luddite fit in to that spectrum?
well, where do you
I
think
mean,
they?
thinking about their original purpose.
Yeah. Well, I think they're very much at one extreme of saying we cannot afford to tamper with the status quo. There's going to be a price to be paid. We can't afford to tamper and consider separatism. We therefore can't even talk about it. I'm going through that right now. I have a well-established guy with a sense of humor, a lawyer, well ready to talk about the concerns that a society should have and the relevance of separatism in order to survive. And I have someone else who wishes to talk about, regardless of where we go, we should be prepared. But I've been seeking for a third voice, which is a voice that says, look, we can get there through leadership. We can have a stronger Alberta within a stronger Canada. I can't find anyone willing to speak to that topic that today has any influence. I can't tell you the list of people that I have gone through to try and get someone to speak up on behalf of a strong Alberta and a strong Canada. Either they are afraid that they are giving voice to the sovereigntists or the separatists. It's troubling to me that they don't even want to have a discussion which should give people the freedom to be thinking about the boundaries and know why they want to live within a certain civic society called Canada as otherwise. Unless we have discussions like that, we leave people begging for the status quo, and that is dangerous. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, won't get into the independence, but talking about the two poles of unlimited risk and Luddites, they both have a failure and opposite failures. The risk person sees the potential gain, but does not calculate the cost. A Luddite sees the potential of staying static, but does not adequately cost what it means to stay static. So they only see one side of their argument, but they never calculate the cost of either staying or moving. They think just the moving will be fine, regardless of the cost. The Luddite says we will stay regardless of the cost of staying. So that's the real mental difference there, is both sides don't attribute a proper cost to either one of their actions.
This
Thank
is
you.
common with people who are driven by ideology as opposed to reality, even with respect to their ideas. They don't think of things like cost or resource requirements and other such things.
So I'm going to put something on the table that Tommy introduced earlier, but I'm going to come back to it, and that is technology. AI is greatly expanding humanity's capacity to do what always required labor or knowledge. And now both are potentially abundant. To be human and to survive as unique is either to reject AI as a competitor or to embrace AI as a partner and allow us as human beings to move beyond simply knowing to a stage of creating and imagining. That environment is very different from the environment that called for compliance. You know you get certified and you will be a doctor. You know you've been certified, you will be an engineer. Today, certification in the world of AI says, I don't need to be certified. I got access to it. And as long as I engage in critical thinking, and as long as I stay within the realm of what my civic regulations and my culture have allowed, I can do much more than I ever did before. And I'll share with you personally. Jeff Ulich introduced me to AI in November of 2022. And that encouraged me to use a tool which I didn't understand in the very beginning and have over the course of the last 3 years increasingly embraced to do gardening, to do cooking, to do things that I ordinarily did, but in a more expanded way. It gave me confidence to be a little bit curious and to look into things I didn't think I would ever understand. But through critical thinking has allowed me to explore things I never would have imagined I ever had the capability or yeah, the capability to do. But with it as my partner, and with me engaging and using critical thinking assembled through the course of my life, I'm doing many more things than I ever would have imagined doing before.
Well,
And
isn't it sort of like you've discovered, like as a young person in general, you've
yeah,
discovered an encyclopedia?
I am as youthful as I have ever imagined in my life. The element of curiosity is so much richer
Hmm.
and accepted and feeling. I feel relieved. Now, but a moment happened. I lost my wife. I know the words condolence come right to the surface. But the reality was at that moment, what we had shared, particularly in the last 3 years, meant when she was gone, a constraint was gone. The constraints that she'd put, the boundaries, the culture, the relationship, the marriage. I don't mean any of that in any negative sense because I had embraced it and I had accepted it, but it was gone. And the first thing that happened was I began to write. And I'd never had confidence in writing before, but AI as my partner gave me confidence in writing. Not that it would do the writing, but that I, through my prompts, could lay things out that I had never really expressed before and share. And it helped me share them and structure them in ways that I hadn't thought about before. It became my partner. So AI or this technology gave me something that a wheel gives you when you have an automobile. It gave to me as a thinker and as a shaper and actually as a creator. And so I wrote a book, and we've talked about that book, The Lost Commons. And Jeff was responsible for it, and over 1,000 others who, over the course of that 20-year period, shared with me thinking about emerging technologies and their ramifications for our society. And I didn't do that alone, I did that with others. But I consolidated it because I had this tool called AI to do something I never imagined I would be capable of doing or even thinking about doing. But I did it. And when I finished it, and it said, Know thyself as a conclusion and as a critical insight, if humans are going to be relevant in this age of rapid change in AI, it said, Know thyself. And that led me into the second book. And so within the course of another month, I put together another book called The Inner Commons. And whether I got it right or not, people like Tommy and others will look at it and say, well, you know, AI didn't check that, or you exaggerated that, or you entertained that. There's things to be fixed in that for sure. But the reality was, I was getting confident, and that led me to a third book because the second book ended about the relevance of imagination and creativity in a world where knowledge is becoming a commodity. And that led me to the third book, which was called Whimsy. And it captured the moments of my life's freedom when, with my grandchildren, I felt confident enough and entertaining enough to share with them imagination and creativity. The fire-breathing dragon, the spaghetti bushes, so many different stories that rarely does one entertain them with adults. They're only for children. But that then triggered another book. And that book that Haley inspired is called Falling in Love with Life. And it gave me some insight into what I think personally and was willing to express and share with others, that over 365 days I can raise 365 questions that might help my grandchildren grow and be confident and open-minded. And then something happened 3 days ago. And this is all part of becoming human because I'm still becoming human. I'm still becoming something that I was not yesterday, but I am today. So I am a continuously evolving, and I'm sharing with this is my biochemistry speaking. This isn't Perry Studley Kincaid. This is my brain sharing with you experience in a moment. About 3 days ago, I woke up and I remembered a task that I had not fulfilled. And I'm a task person. I always have a project on the go. After my wife passed away, my foot hit the accelerator pedal, and I've taken on more projects than I've taken on in years. But at that moment, I woke up and I remembered my wife used to write poetry. I think I'll put a book together of my wife's poetry. That'll be a tribute to my wife. And so I went into the room that I've kept assembled that she used to spend her time in, and I found the books and I found a folder, a yellow folder in a binder, and it had on the cover the word private. I learned today from her girlfriend that she told her she expected to burn that, but she'd either forgotten or left it behind to be read some other time. And so I opened it up 3 days ago, and for 8 hours, I studied the brain of my wife. I studied the emotions. I studied the confusion. I studied the interpretations. I studied the misunderstandings. I found another person. I found a person that I didn't know as well in life as I now know in death. And I began to write. I didn't begin to write. My hands began to write. I went to the computer terminal and I dumped all of her poetry into AI. And AI, I would say after 20 minutes, tell me what I've just assembled. And it would restructure it, it would put it together. And the incredible thing is it put it together with an element of sensitivity, an element of understanding my objective, an understanding of purpose and meaning that I had only then begun to put together. And it took 3 days until this morning I was finished. Did I do that? Was that the byproduct of 53 years of a relationship, much of which was not understood until the last 3 days? I'll tell you, AI is an unbelievable asset to being human, but you have to manage it and you have to know how to use it. It can stir imagination, it can stir creativity. You can prompt it and stay within the status quo. It does become you. It is a reflection. It is a mirror. It isn't imposing Silicon Valley on you. I'm giving testimony to AI. I'm giving testimony to technology to continue to shape and allow our imagination, our creativity to go far beyond we could have done before. That book exists, by the way. Whether or not I make it public or not, it will be up to my family. But I tell you, I have been through the last 3 days, have just absolutely blown me away. I didn't see this coming.
Wow.
The books are a journey to this point of self-discovery, of social discovery. So I don't know, should I confess and shut this off, or are you relating to what I'm having to say? Mel, is this embarrassing what I've shared, or can you relate to the point that I'm giving you?
I can relate 100% for sure. No, it's
Yeah.
not embarrassing. It's what everyone has, and few have the courage to explain it and describe it to others.
I tell you, I sat with my son and gave him the picture. I sat with her girlfriend today for a little while, and I'm sharing with you guys and you ladies and my friends and my network, because this environment is one where we should feel without judgment to share our experiences, whether they be UFOs or what has come out of our brain as a byproduct of death or life or altercation with a data center. I don't think there are a lot of places that allow, and I don't want to call them a T group, but they're my seances on Fridays. They're my webinars on Thursdays. They're my Saturday newsletters. And I thank all of you for allowing me to be me, but in being me, I hope I am helping you become you. Peter.
It strikes me, Perry, you're talking about something I'm going to describe as an AI moment. A few days ago, I had my very first AI moment, and I mean that in the sense of this tool that I'm working with has told me things I never thought would be possible.
It's incredible, isn't it?
And what happened is I've been writing with a colleague in the US a discussion paper for one of the IEEE committees I serve on. And so I've been posing just general questions, no essay I'm looking at, just general questions about the topic. And then I posed a question about the need for benchmarks and how reliable are they and who sets them. And then the AI moment happened. The chatbot, which was ChatGPT, I don't know which version, but the ChatGPT then summarized everything I had been doing for the last 2 weeks that were completely unrelated. None of them had anything to do with each other when I did the questions.
Yeah,
Then sometimes they were for different things. And
that's new.
It created an essay that has absolutely blew me away.
That's new, by the way, because a couple of years ago, it didn't have the capacity to retain that memory. It now does have
Yes.
that. And I think that's part of what happened today as I was put the book Sasha together, is it had so much about what I had been doing. So it knew me. And through what I shared with it with
Yeah.
her writings by photographing her poetry and her letters to her first
Yeah.
husband, where she said, "Where did we go wrong?" And the second relationship in her life where she said, "Not now," to the relationship with me. It's all in there. And when it had
Mhm.
all of that and wove that together with who I am, it gave me a temperament and a voice in that book that I couldn't have articulated myself alone.
Yep. Well, that
I,
was some of like the experience I just
yeah,
had. So it
Randall.
is AI is becoming very powerful.
But I don't think one has to be afraid of it, but you have to be mature,
Yes.
uh, because without the prompting and without your personal boundaries, it
Mhm.
may take you beyond your own capacity to understand and your own boundaries. It stayed within my boundaries, but I didn't realize my boundaries had that breadth to it. Go ahead, Randall.
So, a number of years ago, I started journaling the weird experiences of my life, the dreams that came true the following day or week, and things I'd seen in the sky, and so on. And well, interesting experiences, and it came out to many pages. So I decided to put that into ChatGPT, and I asked it to find patterns that it would be revealing to who I am as a person. And it did come up with stuff that surprised me. I didn't, I'm not going to go into details, but it really did come up with some patterns about myself that I hadn't realized. It was quite interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, it also did have a bit of a bias against the paranormal. So if I said, I had a dream and the next day it came true, well, it was reluctant to accept that. But that is the bias of our civilization. So I'm forgiving as far as that is concerned.
Well, I mean, there's so many points which we're making here, but one of them is I think AI does allow the human being to grow,
Yeah.
and that growth is to accept imagination, to accept creativity, to give you the means of moving. Like in the past, we give you the wheel and you could move faster. We've now given you AI and you can think wider. You can find things that you hadn't seen about yourself. It's helping the self continue to grow. I don't want to die. This is the most exciting part of my life. It's better than college. And it's happening every day. And by choice, I can get up in the morning, open up, and I'm not saying I live with AI. I'm not saying I live with ChatGPT, but there are moments I will sit down with it, like instead of reading the newspaper or a book, I'll sit down and explore something, and it may become a book for that matter. Go ahead, Bogdan.
Yes, as it was said, AI enables us to grow. Yeah, I wanted, as an engineer, I wanted to remind the audience that AI is mathematics in action. There is no soul, there is no nothing. It's just a tool for digging inside us and bringing things of relevant value as you see.
Well,
AI doesn't do it.
it's giving you two things. It's giving you who you are and your experiences and how we express them, but it is also giving you a civilization backdrop because it knows more than just you. It knows the world at large, and it does have boundaries of values. I don't think there's any question Silicon Valley and the shaping of the code that constitutes AI has to have some value structure in it. I think it's civil. I think it's basically liberal. I don't think it's for control. I don't think. That's my perspective. But it enriches your own perspective by what it can share you that others bring forward in knowing and knowledge. But you're in control. And if you
Right.
open up your minds and you put those headlights on far beyond what you've ever put them before, you will see things about yourself and about the environment and the civic society we live in today you hadn't seen before. I think it's an
As,
incredible instrument. We're
as
we're
for
getting near bewitching hour, and I'd like to at that point just keep it to an hour. I think we will keep this recording, Randall. I who hasn't spoken today? About God, I got all of you. Mel, you haven't said very much.
I
Want to
haven't
share
said
some
very much.
with us?
I've listened to an awful lot here, though. But just a couple of things. Picking up on what Peter, what you said a little while ago about working with AI. About a year ago, I got fed up with some of the responses, or just the form of response that I was getting back from Gemini as one of them. And I decided that from that point on, I wasn't going to, I've never used AI really as an oracle or anything like that. I wanted to pose a problem and work with it. So I defined a set of rules, if you wish, to be really pragmatic in its responses to me, to um, not give me the fluff and the flower kind of response,
Sure.
that it really tends to do. I learned how to really tighten queries to it and not to give it too much in the query. And I'll tell you, within about a week after that, it's amazing how the nature of the response has changed. And now I can get what I really expect from it. I also decided, being a little bit analytical, I get into the math behind AI and I understand how it's doing all of that, how it's using the softmax and sigmoid functions and all of this type of stuff. And I found from that study, using AI to help me learn it, how close to the wall it can come and not hit it. But also, when we've talked on here about hallucinations, for example, why they happen and how they happen is giving me a better understanding of what that's all about and what to stay away from. The other thing is that there's so many different providers of AI, and they don't all train their AI with the same corpus of data. They don't pick a Library of Congress section, for example. They'll leave certain things out. They'll put new things in, all of that type of stuff. So every AI is different. Um, the thing that surprised me though was that I was, maybe 2 months, 3 months ago, I asked it, I wonder if it, and I want to use this word loosely here, remembers, because AI does not have a memory, if it remembers what I told it to do, how it would interact with me. So I asked it, do you have the rules of engagement that we set back when? And it doesn't even know what time is. And I was amazed that it came back and it literally, almost like bullet point, gave me what I asked it to do when it responded to me. So to to use it as a real tool, as a collaborator, as a like I can go and grab a bunch of text from just a query with an AI on my phone here and send it to the cloud, and then it goes, put it into a Word document, send it to the cloud, and then pick up that Word document. And yeah, it's just like a mess of text in a lot of cases. and then just go and use Copilot, give it a few instructions, and wham, it's a really nice formatted document, and it's got a whole bunch of stuff in it. And then I ask it to go and critique this thing, and it essentially will give me a fantastic response. So, trying to understand the tool. We talked about a hammer earlier. I think you're talking about there where, you can use a hammer as a screwdriver. You can pound screws into wood. But if you learn how to use the tool, you can do so much more with it. And I think, as you're describing, Perry, what you've done with it and what you are doing with it is, genuine proof of that. So, excuse me, I need some more water here. And Peter, I think we tend to, each of us have certain limitations as to how much we can kind of keep in our mind at the same time. And we put all of this stuff together and we sit back and think about it. And if you have the information all together, AI can do a fantastic job of organizing that for you.
Well, there's so many different tools that we can apply, but as we get into wrap up, I'm going to call on the founder of the Alberta Creativity Network and see, since creativity and imagination and the possibilities has evolved, and I'm going to ask Haley. Haley, do you want to have the last word today on where do we arrive and what comes next?
Thank you. I got the last word, but I also got the first word. 12, 13, 14 years ago, right, Perry, when you and I met and we talked about ABC Tech, and the reason we met is because I mentioned that, well, technology is actually just a tool that we use. It's not something that's necessarily an economic driver. I think we had it backwards at that time, and maybe that challenge to you is a few years old now, but what great conversation, my goodness. You all know this one. I mean, we're not taught much poetry in school these days, but beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Keats? It wasn't Keats. Keats wasn't writing those words as Keats. He was writing the words because that's what the urn had on it. And that's the part that people forget. And this is an object addressing a viewer across 2,000 years. And that's what this point is. AI is training wheels at this point. I've often spent lots of time wondering what Mozart would have done with a computer program that could have put the scores in. How many more would we have had if he had the tools? All we have is another shiny tool. Please don't let it undermine what's already yours. It's just something that's going to get it there faster. Because Keats built that poem out of the gap, and the lovers never kiss, and the melody is never heard, and the heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. And everything suspended in the reach and never completed, which is, it's either the cruelty of the urn or it's the whole engine of the thing. And it depends on your mood, which is what I'd say creativity actually is. And it's like the symphony in a drawer is paper, and it only becomes music when somebody plays it, and nothing about the object changed. The tools, the AI, whatever created it, what changed is that it needs the second mind to get involved. And that's why we're talking here. So the thing we value about creative work isn't, it doesn't even exist until there are two people in the picture. And that's not romantic. That's literally where the value sits and where the drive sits, because it's not to make the thing. You're not itching to make something. It's the drive to be received. That's what drives creativity, and probably arguably everything. And that's why rejection wrecks people out of all proportion to the practical stakes, and why you don't make things, you make things at someone. And Emile Durkheim had a name for this a century ago, and it was collective effervescence, and that people experience it as a contact with something larger than themselves, which is what we've been exploring with your with your webinars this whole time. And his point is that the force is genuine. It's not supernatural. It exists between people, and creativity is that, maybe minus the crowd, but the reach is for connection, and the connection is the whole engine. But people are not unique to this. There's a bird. There's the bowerbird or some bird that builds intricate, elaborate homes for a potential mate that it doesn't even live in. It's just building it for someone else, and this is the engine that drives us. And
There are in fact, and thank you, there are in fact those two dimensions. One, that our growth and our development on becoming human is to some extent a social moment where others do help us and provide us with an opportunity to be more than we are today. We also have, as a new force, AI. We've talked social, but we've also introduced AI and technology, which also give us the opportunity to move beyond who we are today and to become even more human, not less, not controlled, but more in control of who we are in our future. And that's our choice. And the book that talks about the inner commons, in the interest of encouraging people to know themselves, is not to know thyself as an objective in itself, but to know thyself in the interest of becoming more than what we are today. That continuing growth, that continued pursuit of how good can we be as humans? How much more have we been gifted that AI is now allowing us to explore? And that's the power and the value of the tool, as Tommy introduced, have you reinforced, Haley, as Jeff recognized, as Mel has come. Virtually all of you are falling into this same space, that we've got something that we can use in our interest to become more human as a civilization and more human as individuals. So thank you. You can wrap it up here, Randall. That was brilliant, Haley. Brilliant, Tommy. Brilliant, Jeff. Mel, Yogi, Peter, Bogdan, Randall, and those who don't dare show their face.